Hello there and welcome to Lunchtime News here on TV1. You're joining me, Devi Paldano. Now, before we head into your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines this hour.
Colombo High Court lifts overseas travel ban imposed on Basil Rajapaksa. Extraordinary Gazette introduces 2 new ministries. Total number of COVID-19 cases rises to 20,000 in the country. COVID-19 patient attempts to leave IDH, detained by security personnel.
Now, taking a look at one of your headline-making stories, the Colombo High Court lifted the overseas travel ban imposed on former Minister Basil Rajapaksa.
Basil Rajapaksa is the first accused in the case filed under 5 separate indictments for the criminal misappropriation of 2,991 million from the Divinaguma Development Department for the distribution of steel roofing sheets to Divinaguma beneficiaries. When he was released on bail, an order was made for Rajapaksa to appear at the Criminal Investigations Department every 3 months, and this bail condition was also removed by Colombo High Court Judge R. Gurusingha. Attorneys led by President's Counsel Gamini Marapana, appearing for Basil Rajapaksa, filed submissions seeking for the acquittal and release of Rajapaksa and the other accused, citing the evidence examination of the prosecution in the case filed by Attorney General had concluded. They sought for the acquittal and release of Rajapaksa and the other accused without calling for evidence from the defense. The case will be called up again on Wednesday.
An extraordinary gazette was issued last Friday amending the subjects of the Cabinet of Ministers. 2 new cabinet ministries have been established under the extraordinary gazette. They are the Ministries of Technology and the Ministry of Public Security. The police and the civil defense force that were previously under the State Minister of Internal Security, Home Affairs and Disaster Management have been transferred to the Ministry of Public Security. The Department of Registrations of Persons that was under the State Ministry of Defense has been reassigned to the new Ministry of Technology. The Department of Archaeology that was previously under the Ministry of Defense has been reassigned to the Ministry of Finance. The total number of COVID-19 cases in the country has increased to 20,171. The total number of recoveries stand at 14,069. 479 patients were discharged from hospitals yesterday. Meanwhile, 4 deaths related to COVID-19 were reported yesterday. The Government Information Department said a 70-year-old resident of Colombo 15 was pronounced dead when she was admitted to the Colombo National Hospital. The cause of death was pneumonia triggered by COVID-19. A resident of Colombo 12 died upon admission to the Colombo National Hospital due to chronic lung disease together with COVID-19. An 84-year-old woman from Borala was also reported dead yesterday. The cause of death was pneumonia triggered by COVID-19. A 75-year-old woman from Colombo 10 died when he was transferred to the IDH after he was tested positive for COVID-19 while receiving treatment at the Colombo National Hospital. The cause of the death was also pneumonia triggered by COVID-19. The Government Information Department said the total death toll due to COVID-19 in the country has risen to 87. Meanwhile, another 400 COVID-19 cases were identified yesterday. 391 of them were from the Paligoda cluster, while the remaining are among overseas arrivals. Former MP Arjuna Ranatunga said that the United National Party representatives have requested for party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe to be appointed to the National List MP seat in Parliament.
All our ministers made this request. We began discussions last week. Minister Naveen Dissanayake suggested, and even I supported, for Ranil Wickremesinghe to enter Parliament. Rather than considering the needs of the party, there is a huge crisis in the country and we need a forward-thinking leader to be in Parliament. Today we all signed and submitted a written appeal to the leader Ranil Wickremesinghe to consider this and represent us in the Parliament for the benefit of the country and the party. By next week, we can make a decision regarding that.
අපිට එන සතිය වෙනකොට ඒකේ තීරණයක් ගන්න.
ඒ කියන්නේ අවසන් තීරණය මේ වෙද්දී රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්මයා පාර්ලිමේන්තු නියෝජනයට යවන්න.
ඔව් අපි හැම වෙලේම කිව්වේ
We all agreed that now we have to think about the country rather than the interests of individuals. Right now the country and the world are in a recession, and we believe Ranil Wickremesinghe is the right choice to lead the recovery of the country. When I was in the government, I witnessed it firsthand as well. He has no personal interest to enter parliament. Today we handed over this request urging him to enter parliament.
එතුමාට ඒ අවස්ථාව අරගෙන මේ රටේ තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නට මුහුණ දෙන්න එතුමාට සහයෝගය ලැබලා දෙන්න කියලා.
Security personnel at IDH detained a COVID-19 infected person for attempting to leave the hospital without authorization. Police spokesperson D.I. Jajit Rohana said a 22-year-old resident from Dambatagoda attempted to leave at 6:30 p.m. yesterday and was detained by security personnel.
නිරන්තරයෙන් වාර්තා වෙනවා COVID ආසාදිත රෝගීන් පැන යාමේ උත්සාහය.
There are reports of those tested positive for COVID-19 attempting to leave the hospitals without authorization. A patient from Ragama, another from Chilav Hospital, and a woman from IDH either attempted or left their hospitals without obtaining approval from the authorities. Yesterday, a 22-year-old had tried to leave IDH. Our investigation showed that all of these individuals are addicted to drugs or at least involved in drug-related offences. The 22-year-old who tried to leave IDH at around 6:30 p.m. was also addicted to drugs.
IDH රෝහලෙන් පැන යාමට උත්සාහ කර ඇති 22 හැවිරිදි පුද්ගලයා දෙමටගොඩ ප්‍රදේශයේ පදිංචිකරුවේ ඒ වගේම මද්ද්‍රව්‍ය වලට ඇබ්බැහි වූ කෙනෙක්.
Meanwhile, several areas were removed from the list of isolated areas today. Accordingly, Boralla, Vellampitiya, Colombo Fort and Slave Island were released from 5 a.m. today. However, the Vanathamulla Grama Seva division that comes under the Boralla police jurisdiction and the Vekanda Grama Seva division of Slave Island will remain isolated until further notice.
The National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 outbreaks said the isolation status of several areas in Colombo district remains unchanged. Accordingly, Mattakuliya, Modara, Blue Mantle, Kotahena, Grand Pass, Foreshore, Aduruppu Street, Maligavatta, Dematagoda, Keselvatta, Maradana, Peta and Dam Street police divisions in the Colombo district will continue to remain isolated. The isolation status of Jayala and Kadavata was lifted at 5 a.m. today. Nigambo, Ragama, Vattala, Paliagoda and Kalaniya police divisions will continue to remain isolated. Several Grama Seva divisions in Bandaragama in the Kalutara district will also remain isolated. Accordingly, Bogahavatta, Bamunamulla, Kirimantuduava, Koravala, Atulugama South, Bamunamulla and the Galagahamandiya Grama Seva divisions will remain isolated.
කොළඹ සහ ගම්පහ දිස්ත්‍රික්කවල පොලිස් බල ප්‍රදේශ 18ක් ආශ්‍රිතව තවදුරටත් නිරෝධායන
18 police jurisdictions in Colombo and Gampaha district will remain isolated. However, the isolation status of Vellampitiya, Boralla, Fort, Slave Island and Kadavata and Jayala police divisions in Gampaha district were lifted today. However, the Vekanda Grama Seva division of Slave Island and the Vanathamulla Grama Seva division that comes under the Boralla police jurisdiction remains isolated until further notice.
වනාතමුල්ල ග්‍රාම සේවකවසමත් හුදකලා කර තිබෙනවා.
Meanwhile, Moratuwa and Angulana North and South areas, which were isolated on the 9th of this month, were lifted yesterday. According to our correspondent, the Saurapura housing complex and its surrounding areas in Angulana Moratuwa will continue to remain isolated. Meanwhile, public transport resumed today. The Department of Railways said that office trains commenced operations under strict health guidelines. However, the trains will not stop at stations located in isolated areas. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Transport Commission said that interprovincial bus services also began today.
Schools across the island except in the western province and isolated areas were reopened today. Secretary to the Ministry of Education, Professor Kabila Pereira, said schools were open for students from grade 6 to grade 13. The schools will not be open for students from grade 1 to grade 5 due to practical issues in following the health guidelines. The Secretary to the Ministry of Education health guidelines have already been issued to schools.
Bring the students to school. If a student is showing symptoms or experiencing breathing difficulties, don't send them to school. But if there is a suspicion, discuss with the principal and the health authorities and decide whether classes will be held that day. Because we have a responsibility given to us by the government to do it, I request the parents to cooperate with us, considering this more than a collective responsibility, but rather a duty.
Meanwhile, the police have also provided several guidelines for these schools.
The first step. Thanks so much for helping me.
You're most welcome.
මට උදව් කළාට බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
උදව් කිරීමට ලැබීම ගැන සතුටුයි.
எனக்கு உதவியமைக்கு மிக்க நன்றி.
உதவி கிடைத்ததையிட்டு மகிழ்கின்றேன்.
The first step.
The G20 leaders held a two-day virtual meeting via video conference due to the pandemic under the chairmanship of Saudi Arabia, which holds the rotating presidency of the G20 until the end of November. The COVID-19 pandemic, which will throw the global economy into a deep recession this year before an economic rebound expected in 2021, is the top of the agenda. G20 leaders are concerned that the pandemic might further deepen global divisions between rich and the poor. During the meeting, French President Emmanuel Macron said that the world needs a coordinated and united response to effectively fight the coronavirus pandemic. He said the DNA of the G20 is to urgently forge effective multilateral solutions to ongoing situations. Furthermore, China called for concerted efforts from major economies to promote more inclusive development and improve global governance in the post-pandemic era. Chinese President Xi Jinping said the international community is wondering what the Group of 20 can do to make the system better. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump used his final G20 summit to defend his decision to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Accord, a move that took effect on the 4th of November, a day after the presidential election won by Democrat Joe Biden, who has said he will rejoin the agreement as soon as he takes office. The pandemic and prospects of an uneven and uncertain economic recovery were at the center of a two-day online summit under the chairmanship of Saudi Arabia, which will hand the G20 presidency to Italy next month. Saudi King Salman said in his closing remarks that the group had, quote, adopted important policies that will achieve recovery all the way to an economy that is resilient, sustainable, inclusive and balanced, end quote. Leaders of the 20 biggest economies vowed to spare no expense to supply COVID-19 drugs, tests, vaccines affordably and fairly to all people, reflecting worries that the pandemic could deepen divisions between the world's rich and poor. American pharmaceutical company Pfizer and its partner BioNTech submitted an application for emergency authorization in the United States for their COVID-19 vaccine. The first Americans to receive a COVID-19 vaccine could get it as soon as the 11th of December. Dr. Monsef told US media that the plan was to ship vaccines to the immunization sites within 24 hours of a vaccine being approved. The vaccine, which requires 2 doses, has been shown by tests to be 95% effective. Pfizer hopes to produce up to 50 million doses by the end of the year. Pharmaceutical company Moderna has also reported that its vaccine is nearly 95% effective. The company is expected to seek approval for the vaccine in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has raised concerns about the world's poorest securing access to COVID-19 vaccines. Angela Merkel was speaking at a G20 summit which saw leaders promise a fair distribution of vaccines. However, Merkel warned that progress was slow, saying she would raise the matter with Global Vaccine Alliance Gavi. A team of 50 people have helped rescue a male elephant from a deep well in Dharmapuri, southern India. Local villagers dropped banana leaves down for the elephant to eat as the rescue dragged on throughout the night. The elephant was eventually brought up to the surface upside down as cranes and belts lifted it to safety. We leave you with this afternoon with this footage that we obtained from foreign media. For the News First team, I'm David Paldano. Take care.
Hey!